And at 10, FNAF. The Five Nights at Freddy's series is all too familiar on this channel, and I know for a fact that some of you will be typing right now that FNAF is going to be on the PlayStation 5. I mean every FNAF game, okay? Not just the newest one, Security Breach. I don't know if it's been confirmed, but considering how most PlayStation 4 games will be playable on the PlayStation 5, I don't think that there's really any quarrels as to whether they'll be added to the roster. I think that it's inevitable that we end up seeing the other FNAF games, especially when there's a movie on the way, at least at some point. Is that thing even still happening? I don't know. The only update I've seen is that map may be working on it. Oh boy. Also, if you love FNAF and want to see the countless hours I spent researching it and then having to put it into lists, click up in the top right corner right now and you can check out our FNAF playlist. And at 9, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Amnesia: The Dark Descent is one of the most iconic horror games of all time. Being released in 2010, I think this horror classic is due for a remaster. Imagine this game with improved graphics and a new game engine behind it. That would be terrifying. Even if it wasn't in virtual reality, just the sheer thought of the Amnesia series getting a revamp is just bone shaking. And no, I don't mean the Bone Shaker IPA either. That stuff will shake you to your core, but not in a good way. I know that all too well. It's only good from a picture. Anyway, the whole plot of the game is that you wake up in a castle with no memory about yourself. The castle is full of dark and empty halls where you can find clues to your past, like the fact that you erased your own memory in order to save yourself from the trauma of being hunted by a shadow. But then you're still being hunted by that shadow. That hurts, man. Like, imagine you sacrifice your life to save your friends, but then those friends go and get themselves killed 10 minutes after. That's what that feels like. Like, who's your ghost gonna haunt now? Who would you haunt if you were turned into a ghost? Let me know below, because like, I'm actually kind of curious. It says a lot about someone, about like who they'd haunt. I'd probably be so powerful that I'd haunt Satan. Yeah. And at 8, Dead Space Remastered. Dead Space is a survival horror game from 2008 by EA, before they only cared about money. This is the first game in the Dead Space series, and honestly we need a whole series on the PS5, but for now I'll settle for the first one. This game is also iconic, but also in a different way to Amnesia. This game was so popular and so good it got itself 2 sequels, countless spin-offs, and even an animated film and comic prequel. Even FNAF hasn't gotten to the comic prequel side of things yet. Getting the entire Dead Space series on the PS5 in a new and remastered way with a new engine and graphics would be both incredible for old fans and potentially new ones of the series. The game was intended to just create a new IP, but the game became praised for its atmosphere, sound design, and gameplay, some aspects that were insane, especially for 2008. The game has sold more than 2 million copies, so there is another reason to remaster it and put it on the PS5. I would 100% play it, and Dead Space 2 and 3. Okay, just give me all the Dead Space, okay, I'll feel at home. And at 7, Left 4 Dead 2. Left 4 Dead 2 is my favorite zombie survival game, okay? Screw COD Zombies, screw Last of Us, screw Saints and Sinners, screw even Plants vs. Zombies, yeah, I said it. Left 4 Dead 2 is an incredible game, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend that you get it on Steam, or hopefully the PS5. I say specifically Left 4 Dead 2 because of the multiplayer mode where you can play as the zombies, you know, versus mode. Watching and playing that was some of the most fun I've had as a kid, and even somewhat recently. I used to get all my friends on this train, okay? My sister, my best friend, that's it. The random kid I met at the park who just kept pulling his pants down, you know? Anyone and everyone I could, I told them to play this game. Most of them didn't, but I still play Left 4 Dead with my sister and Cameron, so there's something about that. There's just something about mowing down countless waves of zombies as a concert is roaring in the background that just does it for me. Especially when you can set a tank that looks like Maui on fire using fireworks from that concert. And don't even get me started on the mods. If I can kill 1,000 zombies that look like Teletubbies or Zoidbergs with the help of mods, I'll frickin' do it, man! And the tank mod that makes it look like Maui from Moana, I will never not play with that thing again, okay? Just standing there and hearing "what can I say except you're welcome" will never be more terrifying. And at 6, Blair Witch. The Blair Witch game is set 2 years after the events of the 1999 Blair Witch movie, which was set in 1994, so this game takes place in 1996. The game is focused on survival horror in the best way, prioritizing stealth over just hiding until you can kill the scary thing. The game is also a first-person game, and follows Officer Ellis Lunch as he searches for a missing boy. The game lets you use things like a camera, cell phone, flashlight, and your trusty pal Bullet to follow the trail of the missing 9-year-old. You find some creepy things along the way too, like photographs, wooden dolls, and cassette tapes that are how the game integrates the found footage thing into the game. So yes, all you found footage lovers will still get your fix in this game's storytelling and cutscenes. The game came out in 2019, so it's not really due for a remastering, but I still think the game would do incredibly well with the new DualSense controllers and haptic feedback. You could hear the cracking of the branches and feel where it came from in the game through the controller. Oh, that would be terrifying, but so good. Halfway through at number 5, Slender. There are plenty of Slenderman games, only a couple that have actually been made into full games, like Slender the 8 Pages and Slender the Arrival, for example. Both from the same company, but the Arrival was the one that was officially licensed by the guy who created Slenderman for that Photoshop contest oh so long ago. Like, damn. Slenderman and Siren Head were both created and then blew the hell up. Like, maybe I should make a monster in an effort to become rich and famous and then make that character have a movie. Nah, if I did that, I'd have to pay child support. Haha. Get it? Because children are little monsters. Moving on. A new Slenderman game on the PS5 with the ability to use the haptic feedback inside the cameras, and hell, even just Stop It Slender would be good enough for me. I just want scary games to use the new DualSense, okay? Feel the static. Ah, my god, please. In at 4, Sons of the Forest. Sons of the Forest is an up-and-coming sequel to The Forest, one of my favorite games. I love The Forest for just the astounding game design, the sandbox elements combined with the story of trying to find your son after a plane crash onto a cannibal island full of mutants hungry for human flesh. Ah, so good. The Sons of the Forest is a continuation of one of the endings, the ending that actually ends the game instead of the one that lets you keep playing, which makes sense since there's more story with a whole cliffhanger. I'm not gonna spoil it for you in case you haven't played it, but I suggest you do, especially if you want to play Sons of the Forest, or you can also just watch your favorite YouTuber play it. Ooh woo. If he's ever able to play it on the channel, or maybe on my personal one. Am I allowed to say that? Like, I've played it on my own, but I haven't completed it, so honestly it's kind of pointless. And at 3, PT. Holy crap, you knew PT was going to be on this list, okay? PT is probably one of the best examples of horror games of all time. If you're unaware, PT stands for Playable Teaser, and was a first-person horror game for the reinvigoration of the Silent Hill series, which was planned on being known as Silent Hill. The game was very reminiscent of Layers of Fear, where you go around the same level again and again with slight changes. There's a weird little alien baby in a sink, there's a weird hanging freezer with blood coming out of it, there's a hostile ghost named Lisa who is constantly following you, trying to get you. The game is terrifying, and Lisa is even more terrifying. I have a family friend named Lisa who, like, we used to see somewhat often, but like, she didn't look like this, but I can't help but think about her and her family when I hear the name Lisa. So this kind of makes it weird for me. I mean, like, it's also kind of scary. I mean, it's odd. Let's say that, it's odd. Also, is this just like a Canadian thing, or do people like have family friends that you call like aunt and uncle outside of our country? Like your parents' friends that you grew up thinking they're family? I hope it's not just me. Oh god, imagine if it was. Haha, that'd be scarier than PT, but not really. Bring it to the PS5, please. And at 2, Outlast Remastered. Outlast is another horror classic, icon, and titan. Released in 2013, the game has actually appeared on the PS4, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch, so it's highly likely the game could be brought to the PS5. The thing is, I want a new version, remastered, revamped, reinvigorated, rehydrated, whatever adjective you want to use, I'm down for it. This is the game that needs the haptic feedback. Are you kidding? In this game, there's no defending yourself. You're just an investigative journalist with a camera, and if you get attacked, you're done for. You're screwed. You're finished. You're If I can't defend myself, I'm booking it out of there, okay? That goes against my instincts, but whatever, plot, right? Either way, being able to hear the little things and feel the room with the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers would just make it incredible and the experience terrifying. Just think about it, okay? You're in a dark hallway with no light. You bring up a camera so you can see, and you see 4 creatures in front of you. You start walking and they don't notice you. You walk past 1, then 2, but then you feel the controller shaking. The one behind you just noticed. You can feel where they are. You brown your pants and then start crying because the jump scare was the worst of your life. Boom! Done! You understand now. Finally, in at number 1, Phasmophobia. I haven't played Phasmophobia yet. Honestly, I was too scared. Phasmophobia is one of the most iconic horror games right now. I'm not salty. The game is playable both in VR and on flat mode. Basically, this game requires you to find and identify a form of supernatural entity located in a home or school or farmhouse, you know, something like that. They can range from good old spirits to ghosts to jinn to even demons, and they each have their own evidence and quirks that help you identify them. But they also want to kill you because, like, well, what would a horror game be without someone trying to kill you, right? Come on, think about it. Just don't die.
Coming in at number 10, we have Rainbow Six Quarantine. Rainbow Six Quarantine was Ubisoft taking the beloved Rainbow Six franchise and giving it a sci-fi horror twist. So far, we have only seen a trailer, but it looks like you're stuck in some sort of zombie-esque infected building, and there's these infected that are running around all over the place. It can be assumed that you will work as a squad to make your way out of this horror show, and there will be some sort of multiplayer element. Here's the thing, this game has really gone dark since we first saw it at E3 2019. Also, RIP E3, we might never see you again. That is the end of a legacy that brought me some of my fondest gaming moments. But back on track. We don't know if this game is still coming out, but I do have faith that it will see the light of day. Ubisoft stated in 2019 that they had to push a ton of their titles back to make sure that the quality of their games stood strong, and even though this pissed off their investors, it was the right move for the games. I think we will hear something about this game soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if the name got a major overhaul, because I don't think anyone wants to hear the words quarantine anytime soon. Coming in at number 9, we have Ghostwire Tokyo. I mean, I don't really know much about this game. It looks very strange. It seems like the creepy Japanese ghost girl thing that people like to do. There's a lot of that in this game. Also, the game is first person and pulls a lot of elements from games like BioShock, with the ability to use weapons and guns and swords and all that kind of stuff, as well as magic that blasts right out of your fingertips. The trailer that was shown recently has got me hooked and really excited because the game looks like it will be a slight departure from the developer's previous titles. Tango Gameworks cranked out 2 Evil Within games, which were fantastic, but focused on slower gameplay. Ghostwire Tokyo seems to be fast-paced and extremely colorful. This is definitely a game to watch out for. Tango Gameworks founder Shinjin Mikami has worked on some of the best horror titles of all time. Resident Evil 1, 3, 4, and both Evil Within games. This guy cranks out killer content. At number 8, we have In Sound Mind. Not all anticipated horror games coming out for next-gen consoles are going to be made by AAA studios. In Sound Mind looks to be the next-gen horror game that will send a shiver down your spine. What would it look like if you were drifting off into insanity and you had to walk around the horrible corridors of your own mind? Well, In Sound Mind will give you a look at what that could look like. The first-person horror game has you exploring the horrors of your own thoughts through puzzles, boss fights, and enemy encounters that will make you want to sleep with the lights on. Because this game takes place in someone's brain, the laws of reality don't apply, which brings in an element of psychological horror akin to games like Silent Hill 2 and The Condemned. This is an indie title that people should keep an eye out for. Coming in at number 7, we have Sons of the Forest. I don't know if you guys picked up The Forest, but it was an indie survival horror game that saw you stuck on an island after a plane crash. You had to hunt and forage to stay alive, and on top of battling the elements, you had to take on an island packed full of strange, naked humanoid creatures that seemed like they wanted to rip your heart out of your chest. It was a lower budget title, but it came out with some strong reviews, and I'm assuming it sold decently well because we have been told that a sequel is on the way. It seems that the game will follow the same first-person survival horror style, but it's clear that the game has a much larger budget because even from the first look trailer, the game is so much more beautiful. It will be exciting to see what a small studio can do with more power and more money behind it. Coming in at number 6, we have Demon Souls, the game that was Dark Souls before Dark Souls. This is the From Software title that paved the way for the slow, methodical gameplay mechanics that are seen all over the gaming industry now. The Demon Souls remake looks absolutely amazing, and it's made by Blue Point Games, the studio behind the Nathan Drake collection and the Shadow of the Colossus remake. If there's anyone who knows how to remake a game, it's them. I'm so excited to go to the birthplace of the Dark Souls genre. I love these kind of games, and From Software is still making the best version of these punishing hack and slashers. Also, the peek that we got at the Sony conference was incredible. The game looks absolutely gorgeous. Coming in at number 5, we have Scorn. We saw so little about this game. Zero gameplay was shown at the Xbox event where this game was revealed, which really pissed some people off, but even though we didn't get to see how this game plays, it still looked super creepy. The trailer gave off some major Alien/Prometheus vibes, like being stuck on an alien ship surrounded by strange machines and creatures. I have a good feeling that everything you encounter in this game is going to try and kill you in horrible ways. Coming in at number 4, we have Paranoid. Now, I will admit that the demo trailer for this game had a little bit of jank in it, but I really like the premise, and when a game trailer can creep me out, even with jank, I am on board. The game follows a guy who is struggling with his mental health when he gets a phone call from his sister who has been missing for years. From this point, the world starts to rot away, and the apartment building he's living in gets infested by these contorted corpses that the player has to navigate around to survive. Coming in at number 3, we have Cyberpunk 2077. Honestly, I would have put this higher on the list if it wasn't coming out on both current consoles and next gen, but it had to have a spot. Because even though this game isn't horror, there are some elements that are terrifying. The dystopian future that CD Projekt Red has created is full of body modifications, gangs, corrupt police, massive evil corporations, and Keanu Reeves. Well, Keanu's not a scary part, but absolutely awesome. This is one of the most anticipated games of the year, and I think it's going to make a huge splash when it's released. One of the areas you can upgrade is cool. That's a part of your skill tree. You have cool skills. You better believe I'm going to be maxing out those cool points, because that's the whole point of a video game, right? You live out fantasies that you can't realize in real life. Coming in at number 2, we have Resident Evil 8. Let's go, baby! Who doesn't love a good Resident Evil game? This franchise has been rebirthed in such a beautiful way. After RE6, people were upset with the action-focused gameplay that the series shifted to, but with 7, we got brought back to the core survival horror elements, which make this game so rich. And the remakes of previous games in the franchise have been remarkable. Now, what will Resident Evil 8 be? We really don't know much. We saw a trailer at the Sony PS5 reveal event, and it looks like there'll be some sort of werewolf monster in the game, and classic hero Chris Redfield is coming back to kick some zombie butt. Also, it seems like you're gonna be lost in the woods and returning to some creepy mansion, a setting that previous Resident Evil games have done so well. And it would seem that Resident Evil 8 is going to remain in first person, just like Resident Evil 7, which makes me ask the question, will there be a virtual reality version? And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Resident Evil 4 Remake. Okay, calm down before you go in the comments and tear me apart. I know this game hasn't been announced yet, but come on. Capcom has done remakes for 1, 2, and 3, and they were all smash hits. Resident Evil 4 is considered one of the greatest games ever made, and a remake of this game would sell like gangbusters. It's what everyone wants, and even if we don't have a confirmation, I know it's gonna happen. You know it's gonna happen, and we know it's gonna be on the next gen. Not only am I calling that this game is gonna happen, I'm calling that it's gonna come out in 2022, and it's gonna be one of the best games of the year, and it's going to have some sort of tie-in to Resident Evil 8. It's not a fluke that they both take place in a creepy forest in the middle of nowhere. Alright everyone, that has been our list, and as promised, I'm going to give you guys my pick for the classic horror games that I love. My first pick is Resident Evil Remake. The work that Capcom did on bringing this gem back into the forefront is incredible. I'm partway through a playthrough right now, and I have to say I understand why these games are so revered. This game is truly incredible. The remake version on Xbox One, PS4, and Steam is so good, you should not miss it. My next pick is Amnesia. I think it's a little early to call this game a classic, but I think it's very important and it should be recognized. Amnesia really was a breath of fresh air into the horror genre that brought in a new style of play. The first-person run, hide, survive gameplay cranked up the tension and laid the foundation for games like Outlast and so many that followed it. And my last pick is Silent Hill 2. If you like horror games and you haven't played this game, what are you doing? Now, this game can be kind of hard to get your hands on because it came out on PS2 and Konami hasn't updated it for the current consoles, but there's always ways you can play old games, wink wink, nudge nudge, emulators. But for younger gamers who have seen the horrific image of the horror gaming icon Pyramid Head and don't know where he comes from, this is the game. Just to warn you, this game is rated M for a reason.
And at 10, Nightmare Creatures. Nightmare Creatures is a 1997 survival horror game taking place in the mid-19th century. The very gothic, horror-esque story begins when a devil-worshipping cult called the Brotherhood of Hecate were conducting experiments in London to be able to take over the city and then the world. Typical. The Brotherhood tried to develop an elixir that would give them superpowers, however it ended up creating horrifying monsters. Like when Scooby was messing around with the potions in Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. Yeah, you know the one. The creatures ended up being put to use as an army for the Brotherhood, but one of their members sets their HQ on fire. RIP HQ, resulting in the first Great Fire of London. The actual game starts in 1834 when London becomes ground zero for several evil occurrences, and it's up to you to use a plethora of melee weapons to take down the nightmarish creatures. Oh, I get it. There are also ranged weapons available too, like pistols, mines, fire bombs, and even magic spells. But having to fight off a freaking Cronenberg with a sword seems pretty damn cool. Terrifying, but cool. And at 9, Operation Darkness. When you say that the Japanese Xbox community died a while ago, that's an understatement. It was never alive. But despite selling even as little as 400 consoles a month, Japanese game studio Success released an Xbox 360 exclusive game called Operation Darkness on October 11, 2007. The game was a fantasy version of the Second World War and featured you along with your squad fighting supernatural foes like zombies, werewolves, vampires, and dragons. Despite the name of the game devs, Operation Darkness was not a success and became one of the last-gen Xbox exclusive horror titles developed in Japan, which on its own makes it worth a mention, but also because it's a horror game that is also a tactical role-playing strategy game, which isn't something you typically see, and maybe its success, if you can even call it that, is for a reason. And at 8, Zombie U. Zombie U is probably the only zombie game I've ever seen from the Wii U. The game, developed and published by Ubisoft, is a first-person survival horror game released for the Wii U in 2012. The highlight of this game, however, is the use of the gamepad. The gamepad, while in single player, is used extensively to search and scan surrounding areas. However, when in multiplayer, one player controls the zombie horde, using it to spawn in zombies on the map while the other fights them off in an attempt to survive the harshest conditions the opponents can throw at them. The game was influenced by Resident Evil, Condemned, Criminal Origins, and Peter Jackson's King Kong. I only remember seeing this game because Smosh played it during a game time, and the only thing I remember about the game is that they had to have some sort of rig set up to have them record the gamepad with like a GoPro strapped to Ian's chest. Hence why this game is fairly forgotten. Plus, I know you guys hated me last time I said that the Wii U sucked, but like, come on. I only know one person who ever actually had one and not one other who considered getting one. It was just a more expensive DS with like screens that detached. That's it, that's all it was. Boom. Truth bombs. And at 7, The Seventh Guest. The Seventh Guest, released by Virgin Interactive Entertainment, was one of the most revolutionary interactive movie puzzle adventure games of all time, and while it may seem like that only because of the genre, The Seventh Guest told the horror story before your very eyes with pre-rendered 3D graphics, adult content, and live action scenes within the game. No, I don't mean that adult content. The game was re-released on the App Store and even for Mac, and Bill Gates said it should be the new standard in interactive entertainment. The game has been ported in various formats on several systems, with talks of a potential third entry in the series. You relive the night where 6 guests were invited into Stroff Mansion, who arrive with no signs of the owner or anyone else, and the boss battle has you battling for your soul along with your life as you fight off a man who made a pact with a demon to kill children and become a successful toy maker. It's weird. The live action sequences are incredible on their own, so much so that this could have just been a movie and we would have enjoyed it the same, but getting to interact with it makes it that much more special. And at 6, Harvester. Harvester was made to be controversial. The 1996 point-and-click adventure horror was known for its violent content, cult following, and gruesome imagery. When it was first announced back in 1994, the public was shocked. While the game took a while to finish, in 1996, Dr. David Walsh released a list of games that he figured were too violent. Harvester wasn't going to be included until the game's producer, Lee Jacobson, demanded that it be added. The game is full of terrible imagery, like Seventh Guest shot, like the scenes were shot in live action, like cannibalism, a baby's eye popping out then being pushed back in, and children eating their mother. While at the time there weren't enough cat videos in the world to wipe this from memory, now the game has become a distant memory at best and totally forgotten at worst. Or also best, depending on how you look at things. The actual gore, like the eye popping out, was just pixel-based imagery, so it didn't look real, it looked like a video game, but that didn't stop it from being disturbing. And all the blood that actually got on the actors was actual ketchup, so it looked kind of realistic. It's weird. And at 5, Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. Call of Cthulhu, insert the rest of the title here, is a survival horror game released for both Xbox and PC in 2006 and 2005, with the later release being the PC edition. The game was published by Bethesda, yes, that Bethesda, and Ubisoft, and is based off the works of H.P. Lovecraft. The day before my birthday in 1915, Jack Walters is summoned to the siege of a decrepit manor full of bizarre cult members called the Following of Yith, led by Victor Holt. He finds the cultists dead by mass suicide and turns on a strange contraption that unleashes a portal. Then 2 alien beings emerge from the portal and make Walters black out. When he is found, he has gone insane and is sent to Arkham Asylum. I don't think it's that one. The game, despite getting wonderful reviews, has been since long forgotten, and considering how it's about the Dark Lord Cthulhu, who can do no wrong, I'm pretty sure that is the biggest sin imaginable. Just saying. And at 4, Area 51. Area 51 is a science fiction horror FPS that was released way back in 2005. It was a loose remake of the light gun game by the same name from 1995. In 1947, an alien spacecraft crashed near Roswell, New Mexico in the United States. It was taken into custody by the US Air Force and taken to Area 51 in Nevada. The only survivor of a crash was a powerful Grey named Edgar, and he was taken into custody and held by the US military. Eventually, the Greys strike a deal with the Illuminati, where the Greys would get a research base 3 miles below the surface of Area 51 and use it as a landing site, and be given human test subjects where they can research a mutagenic virus that they could use in a war on their home planet. In return, the Greys gave the Illuminati access to their technology. If that doesn't sound like one hell of a sci-fi movie, just imagine being able to play it, because that's what's happening. You get to play through a scenario that happens because of this deal, and now the Illuminati wants to use their virus to dominate the planet. Yay. And at 3, The Dark Eye. The Dark Eye is a first-person psychological horror adventure game released for Windows and Mac. The game features several different techniques like 3D graphics, stop-motion animation, and video segments throughout, and revolves around performances of Edgar Allan Poe stories, with a new plotline used as a framing device. The game is separated into a realistic mode where the framing plot occurs, and a nightmarish mode where Poe's stories are reenacted and narrated. While visiting your uncle, you become ill due to the paint thinner he was using while painting, and you end up passing out and having a nightmarish dream. And you keep waking up and falling back asleep. When you're awake, various plotlines unfold, like your brother wanting to get married and your uncle disapproving, which in all honesty he doesn't have a say since he's only your uncle, but still. It's creepy and worrying and totally not for me, but like, it might be for you, so go for it. And at 2, Suffering. I relate. Suffering is a first/third person shooter horror adventure released in 2008 for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Windows, which tells the story of Torque, a prisoner on death row for murdering his ex-wife and 2 children, a crime which he claims to be innocent, saying that he blacked out and can't remember what happened. Look, I've been watching a lot of Suits recently, so I'm basically a lawyer. Saying that you don't remember the crime and that you blacked out is not going to help you. If anything, it'll make you seem even more guilty to a jury, which is clearly what happened because you're just waiting for death. But the prison he gets sent to begins to be attacked by supernatural threats after being freed by an earthquake. Torque fights his way towards freedom while confronting his own personal demons. The game features 3 endings, all which depend on your actions throughout the game, and various morality checks, where you have the option of being the good man you swear to be, or let prison get you just as you got there. Finally, and at number 1, Lucius. Lucius is a psychological horror stealth game that came out for PC in October of 2012. It revolves around a 6-year-old boy named Lucius, who is the son of, you guessed it, Danny DeVito. No, Lucifer. You play as Lucifer as he kills members of his household, using telekinesis and mind control to orchestrate deadly air quotes accidents that lead to the deaths of Dante Manor's residents. You need to use your head to make sure that you don't leave any evidence that could lead to a mission failing, and the game involves everything from setting a house on fire to sacrificing a journalist and then betraying the man who was helping you sacrifice that journalist. The game even got itself a couple sequels, with Lucius 2, The Prophecy, and Lucius 3, which were released in 2014 and 2018 respectively. There are multiple endings to Lucius, however, only one of them sets up for the next game in the series, so watch how you decide to play these situations. It could very well mean the difference between life and death. Probably not yours because you're the son of Satan, but like, whatever. And at 10, Storm Chasing. What's more terrifying than hearing about a tornado that has nearly started forming just a few kilometers away from your apartment? Chasing one intentionally. While it may look cool in the movies or on TV, actually doing this in real life would be terrifying, especially when you're constantly putting your life at risk to see a tornado, something which everyone can see if you just watch The Wizard of Oz. This game may not be the scariest on this list, but it would be interesting and it would be fairly scary. If you see a cow or some form of debris fly across the screen like it was right in front of your face. And sure, people say that this will happen when pigs fly, but it's when cows fly that manure hits the fan. Being able to chase a storm in VR would not only be a safer way to do that, but we could also give it some otherworldly feel and maybe give it a story that sucks you into another world. When I was in elementary school, I had an idea for a movie called Through a Tornado. Oh man, I don't want to talk about this. And I had gotten so far as to even writing parts of it, but I never did anything with it, mostly because it was a stupid idea. But I mean, I could do better now. Maybe I should. The way outside is looking, I'm gonna have to. Number 9, Solitary Confinement. Imagine you're stuck, locked in solitary confinement. It's pitch black, nobody is with you, but you can hear them. I think this game could be done in stages, and maybe have a sanity meter based on how calm you can stay. The more restless you are, the more the bar ticks down, and the lower it gets, the more intense the noises get, and eventually you could even start to actually hallucinate. And I think that's where this game could really shine. You get locked in, but the real story doesn't start until you go crazy enough to start hallucinating the actual story of the game. And at the end, when your mind comes back into real world, you've somehow escaped. Or have you? Of course the story would be terrifying and not real. Or is it? Number 8, Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm sure we all know Nightmare on Elm Street, the horrifying world where Freddy Krueger will invade your dreams and kill you through them because he can. And if you don't know him, I'm sure you know Scary Terry. Having a Nightmare on Elm Street VR game would be honestly the height of VR horror. Imagine having to fight off Freddy Krueger. I mean, we've had The Exorcist, Paranormal Activity, and other horror movies turned into games or VR games. Why not a classic horror that everyone loves? Especially if it's realistic and really done well. I know that it's difficult to do, but being able to really see Freddy's pores or whatever the hell those things are, or having a lot of detail would make this game incredibly spooky. Oh, and I can just imagine the horrific scenes that would unfold in front of your eyes. Oh man, honestly, I'm surprised that I didn't put this higher on the list. I mean, I need this right now. I'm not gonna play it, but I need it to be a thing, so that Eddie VR can play it, and I can watch him play it and suffer. And it's 7, Aragog. If you've watched any of the Scary VR Games videos on this channel before, you'll know that I hate spiders. I constantly mention Skyrim or any other video game in VR that has a giant spider, because oh my god, it's one of the most terrible things that you can create and you should be ashamed of yourself. Sorry, still not over the fact that I accidentally ran into one in Skyrim. Yeah, I had taken out a bunch of Forsworn and I walked up some stairs and then BOOM! Giant freaking frostbite spider right in my freaking face. I was standing right on top of it. Sorry, the actual game. If you've seen the second Harry Potter movie, I'm sure you'll know about the scene with Aragog, where all the spiders attack and it's just one of the worst things J.K. Rowling has ever allowed to happen. Yeah, that, in VR. Just that, not the actual game, no objective other than surviving, just run away from a million big spiders. That would be the worst thing ever. Okay? I actually don't want this. Why did I suggest this? That's a terrible idea. Can I take it off the list? Is it too late? Really? And at 6, Venom. Venom is a bad mamma jamma and an incredible character. I personally love the movie and feel like it would have been even better if it was rated R. However, even if it wasn't, a Venom VR video game would be terrifying, awesome, and absolute perfection if done right. They have the Spider-Man VR experiences, I know, but imagine a full-blown horror Spider-Man game starring Venom as the protagonist and Carnage as the antagonist. Do you know how incredible that would be? I mean, sure, we have Iron Man VR, but that's exclusive to PlayStation. I want a game where I can turn into a symbiote and scare the hell out of people, but then launch webbing out of my wrists and go off to find the dude who just destroyed an entire city block. I want him to jump scare me. I want to see him kill in the most gruesome fashion. Even though I hate horror in VR, I will play that game because it sounds so damn good. If you're not a fan of Marvel or hell even Spider-Man, you won't understand how incredible that sounds, but oh boy do I. I'm salivating just thinking about it. And if you don't agree, I'll bite off your arms, then your legs, then I'll bite your face right off your head. Then you'll just be some faceless, armless, legless thing rolling around in the street like a turd in the wind. I don't know if that was Venom or Miley Cyrus. Halfway through at number 5, Saw. Need I say more? The famous horror film series Saw would be absolutely horrific in VR. Being put through traps original to the game, as well as the iconic ones like the reverse bear trap, would be such an incredibly intense VR experience. And imagine if it was multiplayer as well and you'd be given specific tasks based on that, or you'd be racing to see who could get the trap off first. Oh my god. Just, like, imagine opening your eyes to see a reverse bear trap on your face. Like, holy crap, what a feeling. I can feel it now. Oh, I'm curling up into a ball. Okay, going down. I've only seen the Saw movies once and oh my god. Imagine that experience in VR and how intense and gut-wrenching that would be. And you could see other players or something losing to the trap, or maybe he's just throwing a few NPCs scripted to die to make you work faster, because if they do it first, you're toast. Oh man, this is something we really need right now. Literally the title of this video. It wouldn't even be your typical horror. It would be more of a psychological horror and just so incredibly good. Oh my god, if you'd play this, let me know in the comments what traps you'd like to see featured in that game. Also, hopefully none of these are already games, otherwise I'll just look foolish. Also, if this does end up being a game, I'm not playing it. No. In a 4 free roam FNAF VR. Well, yes, we get things like the corn maze minigame where we can walk wherever we want. It would be incredible to have a true Five Nights at Freddy's free roaming VR game, where you play as a kid walking around the pizzeria and have to complete tasks throughout the day, but William Afton is always following you and you can see him somewhere, just hiding in like the shadows, or he could be wearing the glitch trap costume because we all know how I feel about that now, and he could be like caught sharpening a knife or something in the back room. Oh man, like if you went back there, this could be so good and so intense. It could be like an escape the killer game by staying out in the open. By no means do I know how to make a game or how to make it good, but I think that this needs to be made this instant. Scott, get on it please. Getting close to the end in a number 3, Buried Alive. Did someone say Riverdale? Being buried alive is potentially the worst way to go, especially since, you know, you're not dead yet. This may be the most terrifying thing that can ever happen to you, or even the most terrifying thing that you can think about having happen to you. Thinking about it happening is already terrifying enough. If you think about it, at least it isn't happening. Dealing with it happening right in front of your face must be incredibly horrific. I'm honestly really scared about being buried alive and watching it happen to me. Even if it isn't really happening, makes me shudder. And I don't think that even if this game was real, I would play it. Even if streaming it would get me millions of views. Actually, on second thought. Number 2, Supernatural Hunting VR. Have you ever wanted to be a Winchester, go out saving people and hunting things? You know, the family business. Well, if we had this VR game, we could. A VR game all about hunting the supernatural would be incredible. Obviously not officially licensed because that would cost way too much money, but I have the perfect idea in mind, and the way I see it, it's incredible. You could have a difficulty meter that turns off the guides the more you go up, and you could canvass witnesses, try and figure out what you're dealing with, and if it was a full game, you could even have a journal or something that you could take notes in for the next time. Obviously, the notes would be filled in automatically as soon as you discover a ghost or whatever it is, and you could just like look back at them for the future, but oh my god, I just think that would be so cool. And honestly, if it was multiplayer, holy crap sticks, I'm not putting this at number 1 because I kind of want to make it myself and I don't want too much attention to it, but when anyone actually like play it, if you have a VR headset and would play it, let me know in the comments, because I have a course on how to make a VR game. I could in theory do it, but I want people to actually play it. Finally, in number 1, Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials is one of the most famous witch trials in history. Now they're just about false accusations. But in all honesty, do you know how cool this game would be if you had to hunt down a witch in a forest or something, but then watch her get burnt at the stake, but she was actually a witch, so while she's being burnt, she's like trying to summon monsters that are scaring you and trying to set her free, and then she could be jump scaring you, and then there would be bursts of blue and green flames as she tried to desperately save herself before ultimately escaping and making you need to chase her down again. It sounds so good. If you can make a game and haven't yet, make this one. I will lose my crap and I'll play it on this channel. Hopefully.
Number 10, Shrek the Horror. Shrek is one of those strange, unexplained phenomenons where for some reason everyone loves it, or loves to make fun of it. The love that the world has for Shrek has become a weird, twisted internet love, but one that I feel could make a good basis for a weird indie horror game. Of course, we do have the very short indie swamp sim game, but I am talking about something a bit more fleshed out than just collecting layers of onions while running away from Shrek in the swamp. Something more complex than just a sort of a Slenderman game, if you will. Maybe instead you play as someone trying to take refuge in Shrek's swamp and are forced to face and defeat the ogre, sneaking around to survive until you finally have discovered the resources you need to construct a weapon to take him down. It's definitely a weird idea, but based on how quickly Shrek turned into a cult classic because of a meme movement that created a bizarre fan base of Shrekies, it could also be insanely successful. Also, we don't have enough ogres in horror games right now. What's up with that?
What are you doing in my swamp?
Number 9. Monster House. I've always wanted to play a game where instead of you being the victim, you were the horror, the monster that was stalking in the night. And anyways, being a victim or a survivor is really all about perspective. In the film Monster House, the house has its own motives, and is possessed by the vengeful spirit of Constance the Giantess. But what if we had a game based around this premise but more horrific? What if you played a game where you were the haunted house, in complete control of scaring all those who came inside, either fighting against a particular group of visitors creatures, trying to scare them off for fear of them destroying you or your property, or instead a horror simulator game where you build and play as your own custom horror house. I think that might be a fun spin on a horrific genre. Number 8. Animatronics, let's go! Speaking of the idea of playing as a villain in a horror game, it would be pretty neat to see FNAF turn into an official one versus many game where you could actually play as a terrifying animatronic and scare your friends. Or even just a solo survival horror where you are playing as the spirit of a dead child trapped in the animatronic and trying to escape. It could provide some interesting context for just why those animatronics feel the need to be so murderous, while also being a creepy storyline to explore all on its own. Number 7. Fatale. Fatale is a graphic novel that could lend well to the feeling of a film noir style horror game. Think of something like LA Noire, but as a horror game, and one where you could maybe also play multiple characters throughout time. Or you can divide the series up into different games for each time period explored in the story, I guess. Fatale is the story of a mysterious and deadly woman, Josephine, and the horrific fate that befalls all of those who fall in love with her, as she has ties to the occult and is constantly being pursued by occultists who aim to control her and use her and her powers for their own insidious means. The narrative is great, and it would be cool to see it used in an interrogation-filled, puzzly, mystery horror game where you are constantly being pursued by violent occultists and find yourself sometimes able to occasionally see supernatural monsters who may have always been near you, hiding in plain sight. Number 6. Vampires. Where are the vampires in video games these days? While vampires may have been massively popular just a few years ago, they've recently seemed to vanish, and not just when it comes to their reflection. It would be cool to see a horror game featuring these kinds of famous creatures of myth return to us. No, I'm not talking about a Twilight game, of course. That wouldn't even be scary. It'd be scary how terrible that would be, I'm sure. I'm talking about a game inspired by something like the newest Dracula miniseries from Netflix, or more feral vampires like the ones featured in 30 Days of Night. Number 5. I Know What You Did Last Summer. When it comes to older films, we've seen some success when revisiting their premise in a video game form. Lots of classic horror films have seen themselves immortalized as a game. One that I feel like could be really cheesy, but also really great, is I Know What You Did Last Summer, or even something like Scream. That idea of a slasher meets teen film could be the right amount of humor meets horror to ensure its success, and the urban legend of a man with a hook for a hand could make for a perfect monster design. Number 4. Siren Head, the full game. We've had a lot of small indie Siren Head games. We've seen a lot of Siren Head in mods for games, but one thing we are still waiting on is Siren Head to actually appear in a full game, all of its own. Considering how terrifying and popular this monster creature has become, we really need to see a full game celebrating it soon. Otherwise, what are we doing with our lives? The silver lining is that there are quite a few fairly good Siren Head small indie games, so hopefully at one point we'll see one of them further developed and extended into a full game. Number 3. Saw vs. Cube. So while we have had a Saw horror game in 2009, it also proved to be pretty terrible. Also, that was 2009! That was over 10 years ago. That's a long time. The game has not aged well, and it was far too close to the films to feel like it was really doing anything new. But I think the premise of Saw, something inspired by the idea, or even inspired by the Canadian indie horror film Cube, which is kind of similar, could be interesting. Although Half Dead 2 seems to have a bit of a Cube feel. Actually, it has a lot of a Cube feel. But also Half Dead 2 is considered to be a pretty great game, so maybe if you combine the idea of Cube and Saw, we could come up with something new that would be also well received, and also do something new for that type of horror. Number 2. Medieval Blair Witch. I personally really enjoyed playing Blair Witch, but I also felt that the glitches prevented me from enjoying it as much as I could have. What would be really cool is to see a witch game like this did right, but maybe a game where instead you are a witch being pursued by those who are hunting you, and perhaps you don't even know if you're a witch or not, as you have a slipping grip on reality, similar to the PTSD episodes Ellis suffers in Blair Witch. And add in a Salem witch trials kind of feel. Let's take this all the way back. But of course, I'd love to see it more set in medieval times as opposed to pioneering times, just because we don't have a lot of horror games from that time period. And good news for a horror game set in pioneer days with witches, we'll likely be seeing some of that soon with the newest Dark Pictures game releasing later this fall, Little Hope. Number 1. Five Nights at Freddy's Party Time! In the FNAF franchise, we usually get to play as a security guard, and while the games are horrifying just from the perspective of someone trying to do their job, avoid death, and earn a paycheck, there is lots of other FNAF lore that could be explored when it comes to the story of these games. The newest installment is rumored to be about a FNAF location in a mall where you will play as a mall security guard where the animatronics potentially are programmed to help you, but also occasionally malfunction and suspect you as an intruder and probably try to murder you. A perspective we have yet to visit though in this franchise is that of those who appear most vulnerable. The kids that interact with these animatronics. We've heard about incidents, the Bite of 87, but we've only revisited such incidents in minigames. How scary would it be to play as a lone kid or group of kids trying to avoid getting attacked during a birthday party where you maybe get separated from your friends, or I don't know, lost in the restaurant? That sounds like it could be even more scary than anything we've played before when it comes to Five Nights. Maybe it could be 5 birthdays instead, and your character's been invited to one every night of the week. That's a lot of birthdays. Maybe even at different FNAF locations actually. That could be cool.